thank you very much for coming here to our session of the 6th session of the Lisbon AI Seminar. I'm very happy to have Luis Correia here today. He's a professor at the Department of Informatics, and he's also a researcher at LASIGE. And his research interests are artificial life, self-organization, multi-agent systems, autonomous robots, and data mining. So let's see what he has to tell us about philosophy and artificial stuff such as intelligence and life.
Okay, thank you both for the kind introduction and for the invitation to be here to do this presentation. I asked Klaus, I suggested a provocative title. He was kind enough to accept it, and I noticed that at least someone was provoked by the title and enticed to come here. I hope not to deceive you, but yeah, so I'd like to. I will try to maintain somehow in general this provocative stance. Hopefully not too much. Please interrupt and ask any questions whenever you feel like it. And of course, we are broadcasting this, and the people that are watching over the Zoom link also please intervene that way. Okay, so the title was of course a connection between philosophy or the Center of Philosophy of Sciences organizing these seminars, and the area I work in, which is computational artificial life and artificial intelligence, and therefore the title comes on account of that, because I'm going to talk about the artificial side of intelligence and the artificial side of life. In this case, computational artificial life. Let me start quoting a philosopher, Dennett, who has been since the beginning of the area of artificial life in 87, more or less. What has been very enthusiastic about the area, and he says in one of his papers entitled "Artificial Life as Philosophy," which I believe is even more provocative than mine, perhaps. He says that there are two likely paths for philosophers to follow in their encounters with a life. I abbreviated artificial life, let's say life. They can see it as a new way of doing philosophy, or simply as a new object worthy of philosophical attention using traditional methods. And then he says, I urge philosophers to take the leap and consider the first to be more important and promising. And he continues, a life like its parent aunt discipline, AI, which artificial intelligence, can be conceived as a sort of philosophy, the creation and testing of elaborate experiments kept honest by requirements that could never be imposed on the naked mind of a human thinker acting alone. In short, a life research is the creation of prosthetically controlled thought experiments of indefinite complexity. And with this, I believe I have an endorsement to continue with this stance, and that's why I referred to in the abstract that was announced in this talk. I mentioned Dennett, and as the starting point for continue in this analysis that covers both AI and a life, and hopefully with connections to philosophy or to interesting questions that philosophy may be interested in. I suppose that if I would not talk on something about the fashion, it would be kind of a deception here. So I'm going to start right away about the fashion side of AI, large language models, LLMs for short, and which are produced by the names well known: ChatGPT, first Bard, Claude, and several others. Okay, I'll try to connect this with the theme of the seminar today. But let me just start to characterize what these systems are. So these are large language model systems that learn by consuming, let's say, in the training process, a huge amount of examples, in particular text, and in fact, more than text, well, you could say language, including computer languages and languages in several natural language, so English, Portuguese, Chinese, whatever. Chinese, I'm not sure they have, but and so they can you can prompt them to build programs, etc. And they, after learning, they can generalize when they are questioned with cases that are somehow similar to what they have seen in the training set. And notice that they have seen a lot. Okay, the training sets are really large, and this raises, in my opinion, an interesting question: to what extent can these systems reason? Okay, which I believe it's a question that might be interesting in terms of philosophy, and I think this is somehow related to the version of the Chinese room, or to the Chinese room metaphor that was proposed by a philosopher, John Searle. But for those that don't know the metaphor, John Searle was discussing what, in general terms, is considered reasoning or intelligence is a property of the function or of the matter. Okay, so basically, can intelligence be produced by some mechanism, some system that is composed by certain types of components, or does it need to be produced by a system that is which we all know of biological organisms? Okay, so biochemistry, etc., etc. And the metaphor he presented was: suppose that there is a room with an input window and an output window, and the input window we present text, questions, whatever, in Chinese, and there is someone inside, or whatever, it can be a machine, can be automated if possible, that has a kind of a dictionary, very complete dictionary, that can translate the Chinese to the language that let's consider the person understands, and then the person understanding that language can, supposing it's a question, can answer that question in his or her own language, and then get back to the reverse dictionary and translate that back to Chinese and produce an output in Chinese. Okay, so the point of Searle was, okay, this person or this machine, it's a machine, doesn't need to understand Chinese at all, just needs to have a process to convert the Chinese into a language that the person understands and to produce the output. Okay, I'm not going to discuss here the possibilities, because Searle said was defended that it was dependent on the matter, so on the biologists. While some others defend that is dependent on the form, also on the structure, and which gives, of course, kind of opens ways to consider that machines can never think, or that machines that were able to do something like this can already think. I'm not going to discuss that, but I just give you some similarity to the problem. And because in my opinion, what we should discuss is to what extent is this reasoning, okay? So, and to what extent the person that is inside is reasoning. And I give you an example that in terms of reasoning, there are several types of reasoning. And in fact, the question should be, to what extent can this single form of reasoning go? Because large language models, they reason, okay? But why do I call it single form? Because they learn by a process of consuming huge amounts of text, okay? And then generalizing. They are not learning to classify anything. They are not learning there are some components afterwards that put this to perfection the system that humans do some kind of input. I'll get to that. But the main source of reasoning here is huge consumption of material text, and then try to compose answers and to detect and to answer to comments or make suggestions when they are prompted by the user with answers that are similar to what they have consumed. And let me give you an example here. I hope this, can you all read the letters in the back? Yes. Okay. And I'm asking you, isn't this reasoning? Because this is an example of one of these systems, the PALM, which is behind the BART, but in a simplified version. This I get to the complexity of the version that they used in this paper. And it has an example of a prompt that we give to the system. Well, the researchers gave to the system and the output. So the prompt is, Michael is at that really famous museum in France, looking at its most famous painting. However, the artist who made this painting just makes Michael think of his favorite cartoon character from his childhood. What was the country of origin of the thing that the cartoon character usually holds in his hand? Okay, so you see, it's okay. To answer this, obviously we need some kind of reason. Okay, we may say that the way the systems do is cheating compared to what kind of reason we are conceiving, etc., etc. But again, if we look at planes, they don't flap the wings, and we cannot say that they are cheating in flying. Okay, they fly in another way. So there is a reason behind this. Why? Because I'm going to read now the output of the system, the answer. The most did any of you one without reading the answer? Did any of you one guess what they were talking about? What they were asking? Did you? Yeah. Well, you need to be familiar with several things, right? With what is the most famous, well, not most famous, but really famous museum in France, which I think we all agree that is the Louvre. And looking at its most famous painting, which I think we all know, it's Mona Lisa, right? And the artist who made the painting, we also all know that it was Leonardo da Vinci. But then the character of that reminds of the character, cartoon character, etc. We need to know about cartoons, which usually it's not the same segment of population that knows both of the things. And in fact, you see the explanation here. The most famous painting is the Louvre. In the Louvre is the Mona Lisa. So he doesn't even bother to explain the importance of the museum. He already considers that it's the Louvre. The artist who made Mona Lisa is Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci also is also the name of the main character in the cartoon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And Leonardo da Vinci is from Italy, which is not, and it's not, you see that here is something that it's not to the point, right? He just added, it's not false, it's true, in fact, but it's not to the point. And the thing that Leonardo da Vinci usually holds in his hand, which is not Leonardo da Vinci, because the cartoon character is not Da Vinci, it's only Leonardo, right? So he's here kind of doing something, and we'll get back to that. It's called hallucination. It's a little bit, and the country of origin of the katana is Japan, and the answer is Japan. So it's, I mean, this is reasoning, right? We see this now. Is it cheating or not? Well, it's a form of producing reason, but I think there's something interesting to discuss here. And I'm not going to dwell too much on large language models, but this is a starting point to of a famous artificial intelligence set of tools that is very actual, and that is going to continue to prompt several other discussions, quite interesting in terms of reasoning, intelligence, etc., etc. By the way, about the prompts, you know that there's a technological activity nowadays that is called prompt engineering, which is the way to write prompts to this, so that these systems can interpret in a nice way, or in a way, and so which is quite interesting that it's so new that it's even difficult to find papers about that, but there exist people working on it. So basically, we find many things on this and in the internet, just in the internet. Okay. So what are the problems of large language models currently? And currently, it's nowadays, maybe in a couple of months, that they are going to solve it. By the way, there was an interesting interview with Fernando Correia, who is one of the directors of OpenAI. He's a Portuguese guy, but he has been for ages in the United States. He has he's a very famous researcher in natural language processing, and now he's one of the directors of Google AI, OpenAI. No, sorry, not OpenAI. The Google department of AI in London that is working with these models. He made an interview to Publico recently, and there is another one also quite recently, 2 days ago or so, Fernando Gil, also on the Fernando Gil, José Gil, yes, not yes, José Gil on the AI and philosophy, which is quite interesting also. I'm not covering the same topic, so it's interesting anyway. So, what are the problems nowadays? Well, one of them, and this is Fernando Pereira also points this out, is hallucinations, which is the name that is given to situations where the system produces plausible answers, although they are outright incorrect or they are nonsense. Okay, it's plausible in a kind of synthetic and maybe some local semantic way, but then when we relate with other things, we see that it's not. And this happens, and it's one of the problems of the system. And another one is that all of these systems need a lot of human corrections. And to give you an idea, this was an article that came out in the Time magazine a couple of years ago. An exclusive saying OpenAI used Kenyan workers on less than $2 per hour to make ChatGPT less toxic. Okay, I'll get back to the toxicity and how it arises here, but this is just to give you an idea that they had a huge effort of people classifying phrases, and there is the evidence for another type of learning that is called reinforcement learning, because they just said, okay, this is not good and this is good, so they reinforce negatively some and positively some phrases. When they were given basically a list for a certain situation, a list of answers, and they would choose which answers were acceptable and which were not acceptable. So it's this was integrated in the system to improve it. Okay. Okay, so let's continue in this idea of reasoning. on this aspect of reasoning. And a question we may raise. The question is numbers count. What numbers? The capacity of the systems count. Well, it's interesting, and here we go to another domain, and I suspect that's probably we have some biologists here. That we go to biology. This is a paper by Herculano Uzel in 2009, where he does a comparative study on animal brains. And he suggests that a view of cognitive abilities that is centered on absolute numbers of neurons. Okay, so in animals. Okay, in animals. In fact, he says that the human brain, although it's not involving the largest one, but it's very compact and very well arranged, so the number of neurons is quite large. He does this comparison, and I wanted to extend this comparison to the artificial realm. And let's look at some of the most famous large language models and to their number of parameters. Notice that parameters is not the number of neurons, okay? It's the number of synapses, because learning occurs both in real organisms and in artificial systems. You know that large language models are supported by huge neural networks, right? Huge artificial neurons. So, and the learning in neural networks, both biological and artificial, is done in the synapses. So in the connections between the neurons, not in the neurons themselves. Okay. So the parameters of the systems, it's a better way to estimate the complexity of the model. And we see that in large language models, we have GPT-4 ahead with over 1 teraparameter, sorry, 10 to the power of 12, estimated, because the OpenAI doesn't disclose the number. Palm, the one I presented the example with the Ninja Turtle, he's approximately half of this. Let's say it's 5.4 to the times power of 11, 10 to the power of 11, and GPT 3.5, the one that we can freely access online, is 1.8 to the power of 10 to the power of 11, and BARD, the Google version of the large language model that is available online, also is 1.4, so approximately the same size. Okay. Now the human brain has, in terms of synapses, an estimated 2.5 to the times 10 to the power of 14. Okay, so it's compared to GPT-4, it's about 2 orders of magnitude more. Okay, so it's the artificial systems are closing in. Okay, but I believe that and biologists also discuss this a lot, because the numbers are not exact, and that's why I put this parenthesis here. In human brain, there is the last estimates more considered are 8.6 times 10 to the power of 10 neurons, and there are 8.5 times 10 to the power of 10 glial cells, which are very much an unknown field yet compared to the neurons. And in some years ago, they quite recently they were yet considered to just produce energy to the neurons, but recently they have found that glial cells also have similar responses to neurons, but at a different time rate, so they are lower to respond. So this will raise still a lot of unknown here, but you see that the artificial systems are closing in. Okay, and since you're talking about animals, and I will recurrently go here because, of course, of artificial life, but because of intelligence also. It's interesting to remember Moravec's paradox. Hans Moravec in the late 80s said that symbolic reasoning demands little computation compared to sensory motor capabilities, which demand significant computation. This is quite a bombastic statement, but he defends this quite well, I believe. And one thing that he raises, one idea that he raises, is that the evolution time of different species might be a meaningful indicator. Okay? Might be. Okay? We have to consider that the scale factor, that once we increase the complexity of the system, it's easier to the increase of complexity in the next steps may be an exponential increase. So there's a discussion here, but a room for discussion. But it's quite interesting to see that this represents the evolution of life or of the universe, if you want. And each unit, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is a billion years, okay, ago. So the 0 would be the current time, and then we go back in time. So 1 billion years ago, we were here in the beginning or the appearance of bacteria. So he has the landmarks. The first forms of living, the prokaryotes, appeared 4 billion years ago, and then photosynthesis somewhere between 3.5. Eukaryotes, atmospheric oxygen here, only 2 billion or a little bit more, and then the eukaryotes, and then bacteria 1 billion years ago. So from the first forms of living, the prokaryotes, to the bacteria, it's 3 billion years. Okay, and in 1 billion year so in the last billion year evolved the rest of life on Earth, and the humans, the primates are here. The Homo sapiens is here, so you see 2,000, tens of thousands of units of the billion year, and the writing is much closer. So an order of magnitude in terms of the difference between the periods of Homo sapiens. So the idea here is that, okay, since the Homo sapiens and to produce writing, it was a little step compared to the time that was spent here in producing more complex animals that had to consume, that had to feed themselves, to reproduce, etc., etc. So okay, this may have a meaning. So and Moravec said the capability of moving and surviving in a dynamic world is a necessary base for development of intelligence. Okay, and we have some forms of some examples here, since our beloved ants that we know, those that have some house in the country know that or have visited the families that we leave a drop of honey in the counter in the kitchen, and the next day it's full of ants. How they discover that is amazing. The bees, how do they discover and they signal the flowers to others is also a very interesting form of communication and of intelligence. And frogs, by the way, frogs have the biologists found out that the eye of the frog does not detect prey if they are not moving. So the eye is, the evolution developed the eye so that it detects large moving objects and small moving objects. Of course, large moving objects to escape because it's a predator probably, and small moving objects because they are prey. But if you put the prey still, so they are stick to some objects, if they don't move, the eye doesn't even detect them, which is quite amazing, right? We realize that the animal, how can it survive with that? But in nature, that doesn't seem to support. That doesn't seem to pose a problem. Okay, And then we can go on, and as Damasio did, considering the types of consciousness, for instance, the proto-self or reptilian brain, according to MacLean, and then the core consciousness, and then the autobiographical self, of which dolphins and chimps are examples, of course, together with the humans. And other animals that Damasio also defend, they have this autobiographical self, which is the higher type of form of cognition. Now, another aspect and regarding animals is that, regarding natural life, is the embodiment, that all forms of natural intelligence that we know are embodied and in autonomous organisms. Okay? And this is quite significant because the organisms, they need to have sensors and actuators to act in a real world. And so perception and action works in a physical reality, in a context, in an environment that evolution evolved together with the living form. So in fact, I mean, the context in general may include other living forms, not only passive material matters. Okay, and in computers, computers have had a hard time in capturing such reality and systems. The first initiative to develop a system to have common sense was led by Dennett some years ago. And he said that with a few thousands of rules, you would be able to endow an artificial system, a computer with common sense. But it turns out that now it's going in millions of rules, and things like very evident, like for us that we put a bottle here, right, and over a table. And in the beginning they said, okay, now we move the table. Where is the bottle? And they would say the bottle is here in this position, like if in cartoons, like you pull the table quickly and the bottle stays in the same place. But there in the cartoons they eventually fall, but there it didn't fall. So they had to do all the rules. And for instance, something evident for everybody that to pour coffee in a cup, you need to have the cup with the opening upside down, right? Not on the upper side, did not turn down. So the force of gravity, etc., etc. So this had all to be put in the computer. Now the large language models, they have all this knowledge, so they for them this is not it's not difficult. I mean, they have this, but it has has been difficult up to now. And let me open the field again in biology to other forms of intelligence. That this book, it exists in Portuguese, also translated, called The Revolution of the Plants, translate literally, Evolução das Plantas in Portuguese, by Stephen Mancuso and Alessandro Viola. And they, in a report by Michael Pollan in the New Yorker a few years ago, it said, it quotes that Mancuso, intelligence is the ability to solve problems. In place of a brain, what I'm looking for is a distributive sort of intelligence, as we see in swarming of birds. Okay, so basically Mancuso and some other biologists defend that there is intelligence in the behavior of plants. Okay, although they don't have neurons. Okay, this is the discussion, and the main point of friction here is that some biologists, including Mancuso, they in fact he named it lab of neurobiology of plants. So they wanted to call this and to launch a journal with this title, and it seems that the publisher didn't want, because they said that it wouldn't make sense because plants don't have neurons, and so they had to name the journal. I believe it's called Signaling and Acting in Plants or something like that, the name of the journal. Okay, but the idea of their idea, they know well that plants don't have neurons, but what they say is that they have cells, of course, and these cells already are able to to endow the plants with capabilities of judgment, of decision, etc., etc. And of course, in evolutionary terms, some cells had to precede the actual neurons at some point, and already with some of their capabilities. Of course, neurons are much more efficient, but that's what they found. And Poland says that Mancuso's hypothesis is that something similar is at work in plants, so that as the distributed sort of intelligence, with thousands of root tips playing the role of the individual birds. I was preparing this seminar, and I knew the work of Mancuso. That's why I quoted it, because of other forms of intelligence. And actually, I some years ago, I co-supervised the master thesis on bioinformatics and MBBC and computation biology. The master set we have here with a colleague in plant biology. That she's an expert in roots, plant roots. I learned a lot with that, and that the roots, the apex of the plants, they typically are looking for three types of substances: water, nitrogen, and phosphorus. And of course, they do not consume that. The plant does not consume all those ingredients, all those elements, not all those ingredients in the same quantity. So it consumes more water and nitrogen and less phosphorus. Okay, but the roots are kind of optimal, let's say, or tendentially optimal in balancing that. So as depending on the needs of the plant. So the experimenters have tried to put some more phosphorus in one region and more nitrogen in another to separate and see how the plant would grow. And it would grow the apexes to the regions where it was needing more of that substances. Which is quite interesting. So the self-regulation. And then while preparing that, I stumbled in fact, it was Poland, I think, that or Mancuso in a paper that quoted Darwin himself. He wrote a book, The Power of Movement in Plants, which finishes with this phrase that I'm quoting here. It's hardly an exaggeration to say that the tip of the radical, having the power of directing the movements of the adjoining parts, acts like the brain of one of the lower animals, the brain being seated with the anterior end of the body, receiving impressions from the sense organs and directing the several movements. And then Poland makes this interpretation that Darwin suggests the plant as a kind of an upside-down animal, with its main sensory organs and brain on the bottom and underground, and its sexual organs on top, so the flowers and the leaves, well, the flowers in fact for the sexual organs. Okay, so it's interesting that Darwin already in 1880 already was suggesting that plants have some, or even plants in fact, some sort of intelligence. So it's quite strange is that nowadays we still are discussing this. And by the way, I know if you look at the debate regarding the plant intelligence, many biologists, they are outrageously complaining that it doesn't make sense, etc., etc. But it's interesting to recall that Carl von Frisch, the biologist who first found out the behavior, the communicating behavior of the bees, when he presented that in conferences, you know that the bees, for those that don't know, the bees, they find flowers to eat some nectar that they want to collect. And when they get back to the nest, they signal that to the other bees. They dance. They do a dance in the ground. It's not flying. It's in the ground. They walk, and they do a kind of an eight. Okay, and the perpendicular plane of this eight points into the direction of the food, so it's the perpendicular, and the rhythm of the dancing, it gives an indication of how far it is. Okay, so and when Carl von Frisch was presenting this, saying that the bees was a kind of how they say stumped, and they were wooing him in the conference. Biologists, fellows of him, so they did that. So it's quite interesting that things do not change so much in human in society. Okay, and there is a researcher on this area of plant intelligence, Calvo, that in a paper in Synthesis in 2016 in a journal, he says, philosophy can contribute in a distinctive manner to the establishment and consolidation of plant neurobiology as an interdisciplinary endeavor with a research agenda of its own by providing a theoretical and methodological framework much needed for the guidance of plant research. So in particular, he was pointing out an aspect that that they are studying now to know if plants have if they can assess if plants have expectations. Okay, and so he was discussing how this can be, how can an experiment on that be prepared, etc. Okay, so and of course, because finding that if it's they can affirmatively, if they can confirm that plants have expectations, and then of course there is an obvious signal of intelligence there. Okay, in this term, I think we are certainly past the era of only humans are intelligent, but where does it start? Okay, another answer, and this I should thank one of my current students, Mafalda, from the cognitive science masters, that while preparing her work, she pointed out this video of Michael Levin, which I urge you. Oops, I don't have the title here. Well, the title is here. It's very small. It's called "Can Cells Think?" Question mark. It's a video you can watch in YouTube, 8 minutes, and I think it's quite revealing. And he basically defends that all natural, I added, intelligence is collective intelligence. So this is another interesting idea to work on, in my opinion. He in a paper with a colleague Balushka, on having no head. It's a quite interesting paper, cognition throughout biological systems. They say we have surveyed a broad range of systems at various scales, from molecular to organismal, which have their own distinct ability to process information, make decisions, and achieve specific goal states. Neural-like computation, decision-making, and memory have been reported in sperm, and he has he cites the papers, amoeba, yeast, and plants, using ubiquitous mechanisms like cytoskeletal elements, which appear to be also involved in neural information processing. And another quote. It is clear, and this is my outline highlight here, it is clear that neural networks have no monopoly on such functions. Okay, this is quite an interesting aspect that maybe most of us are not prepared for that. And let me take the opportunity to pick up the term of self-organization, which is the idea. Notice that I put this image here because this is the image of in the video of Michael Levin talking himself, and he said that basically he starts by saying, when he's saying intelligence, collective intelligence, it continues that because it's a product of the large amount of cells that we have in our bodies, and so this disaggregates in giving the idea of the cells, and then flows up in the cell tissue, etc., etc. It's quite an interesting idea, and so this means that our cells are self-organized. I'll get back to that, to the intelligence and self-organization. But I give you here some examples, for instance, of the birds flying in a V-shaped formation, which they self-organize, and in fact, the leader is not the single leader, so it's not the leader of the band. The leader is changing in migratory birds. The leader changes over time, and so, but they maintain the patterns. This is a beehive, as you see the shapes of the hexagonal shapes of the cells where they deposit food and honey, etc., etc. And this is a slime mold. Slime mold is in fact a collective of bacteria. I think it's a fungus, fungi. It's a fungus spilaginosus. I think it's the Portuguese term. And they aggregate, when we see them microscopically like this, is because they aggregate to avoid further depletion of moisture. So when the weather is dry, they tend to aggregate to maintain some humidity. If it rains, they disperse and we don't see them. Okay, a fish school, and this is a nice self-organized queue, which also has some political relevance because it depicts one of the queues in a voting booth in the first 3 elections in South Africa. You see the amount of people, of course, nobody knew how many people they expect to vote, etc. So there's a lot of people, and people self-organized in this shape that nobody defined in the ground, etc. Okay, and we, if we look at the self-organization, in particular the flocking, I have here a video that is, it's an old one, but I wanted to show precisely when this came up. And you see the flocking of birds simulated, and they avoid obstacles, but they maintain the flock, right? They contour the obstacles, so they avoid it and they contour the flock. And this was proposed by Reynolds, this model, and it's a very simple model with only 3 rules. The first one is if they are too close, for that each bird follows these 3 rules. If it's too close to other birds or to an object, move away. If it's too far to other birds, move closer. And if this is in priority terms, and if it doesn't use the first 2 rules, align to the average orientation of the closest birds. Okay, and this has a few parameters, what is the meaning of too close? So it's a kind of a threshold. What is the meaning of too far? Also a threshold defined, and 3 rates of movement. So the separate rotation angle, the approach rotation angle, and the align rotation angle that are used in each of these rules. So you see a very minimal example. Of course, the other day someone was asking me that, does that mean that the birds follow these rules? And we don't know, of course. But what we know is that this is the minimal set of rules of complexity that we know allows this type of behavior. So nature usually is economical, so it doesn't put a lot of machinery to do something that it can do in a simpler way. So it's fairly reasonable to assume that birds would follow or are following something like this. Okay, and this gives us an idea also of the potential of using computational artificial life precisely to look at these very basic principles and in self-organization in particular. Okay, notice that self-organization, we can define what is self-organized by several properties. One is the first, maybe no external or central control. So there is a bunch of agents that organizes together without anyone leading, either in the group or outside the group. There is another modulation. So in fact, we notice this by an increase in order after a significant perturbation. Usually by external factors. Adaptability, so that it tolerates some small perturbations and still maintain the behavior of the whole. And the interaction between the components, the elements, the active agents that compose the swarm, if you want to call it like that, and their interaction with the environment, and the asynchronism, the fact that they do not decide everything at the same time. So they decide locally at their own timing. This is also an important aspect that is sometimes is not considered in computer simulations that for practical reasons usually use asynchronous updating, which may introduce artifacts in the simulation. So it's just one that once we are considering computational artificial life, it's important to take that into account. And there is a very interesting idea proposed by Stuart Kaufman about the importance of self-organization. 10 minutes, thank you. So basically that it may exist prior to life or prior to evolution. And he says that the mathematical theory of the emergence of collectively autocatalytic sets. Autocatalytic sets are basically autocatalytic reactors. In fact, there is a concept that exists in chemistry where you put substances in what the chemists call a reactor. Basically, it's a pan, okay, and they react and they produce other elements, and these elements they exist already in the pan. If you feed the pan with the same original elements, then they can the new elements that are produced, and they can catalyze new elements, and the thing can create a diversity of elements of which you can then collect and observe. So this is basically, in general, collective autocatalytic sets of elements that Kaufman was not considering elements, chemical elements at this point. He was considering organic molecules and other more complex ones. And then he asks, but let me continue. And it posits an ensemble of chemical reaction networks, each of which has molecules as substrates and products linked by chemical reactions in a reaction graph. And he asks, can it apply to the emergence of complexity in a chaotic universe? And this is a very interesting idea, especially because Kaufman says that this may have produced life even before there was evolution, in the sense that there was selection. Okay, so the fact that the things appear and then they create opportunities, of which then selection is just a way of maintaining the ones that are more that have more possibilities to connect to in this kind of autocatalytic network. And computation artificial life may help studying and disclosing some basic principles of such theory, and towards answering what I believe it's one big question now related with artificial intelligence, which is how does mind emerge from the brain? I would correct this, and how does mind emerge from the brain and body? Okay. Now, in artificial intelligence, I know that body is not something very important at the moment. Okay, but we also have to take into account that our concept of body might be how do you say, overdue, ultrapassado, overcome, yeah. Might be in the sense that, for instance, if I ask you what's the temperature now in Rio de Janeiro, nobody knows, right? Well, you can estimate the best effort. But if I ask an artificial intelligence what's the temperature in Rio de Janeiro, it knows, right? So we can try to stretch a little bit our idea of the body, the fact that the internet goes all over and it has some senses. Of course, it doesn't know everything and doesn't have movement, etc. But at least we should not consider this completely disembodied. And I have to put this picture here. I don't know if you're not fans of the Matrix, then it's your problem. You should be. But this is, I like this picture, and I like to show it as an example in a movie. Of course, this is a movie. For those, this is the third, the Matrix Revolutions. And in the end, without spoiling, this is with the main character is interacting with machines. This is a huge set of machines that joins together and speaks at a single voice. And the interesting issue for me, and I was not sure if to put this here or next to the picture of Michael Levin, the one that is disaggregating. and showing this. The only thing is that here they use the plural. They do not use the singular. They say we decided, they are discussing with the characters some aspects, okay? And they talk about we with a very deep voice, like a huge or so they call it text machine, yeah, in the book, okay, and so they do not use the first person pronoun as we do. It would be interesting that ourselves we have make a revolution and say, no, you're not. We are the cells talking about ourselves. Okay, I'm digressing. Okay, I just want to close with a few observations on the risk of the technology, AI, and the artificial intelligence in particular. Something that has been pointed out by many already, that the manipulation risks by who has the data and by who has the technology, to carry those huge models of billions of parameters is not simple, it's expensive, and so you need to have the means to that. And the getting out of control, that this is already in 2017 that Facebook shut down an artificial intelligence engine after developers discovered that the AI had created its own unique language that humans can't understand while discussing with itself, right? And they create some babbling, and they just to make sure that they disconnected the thing. So, and the risks are already here. So this is not the future, okay? These risks are here. I like to also quote Pedro Domingos, a Portuguese researcher working at the University of Seattle, that says that AI has the power. The danger is AI with the power, but without enough intelligence. And that's what is happening currently. We have to survey that. AI, otherwise, can be looked at as a tool, but as any other tool, it empowers humans, but not only in nice activities, but also in unethical ones. We all know the Cambridge Analytica scandal, the AI bots in social networks, the fake news images and videos, which is amazing that now there is one available online where you can record your voice and the image, and that it produces, when you say translate the message to Chinese, and it talks in Chinese with you doing the movements, like if you know Chinese or something. Well, you may know some of you, but it's just any language. And so the AI as a tool amplifies all the good and the bad of our society by solving larger problems and by solving them fast. And that's one of the aspects. And with that tool, we notice bias, racism, discrimination, which, and I like this, is not generated by the AI tools. It's what exists in data sets used to teach AI. Okay, and that's the one of the important aspects. And I wanted also to put the question in these terms. Do we encourage our children to learn whatever they can just by using the internet without any supervision? I don't believe anybody in his own mind would say yes. The answer is this, yes. So why should then artificial intelligence do that, learn by themselves without supervision? Like if they were more intelligent than what they are. And you see the slide that the ChatGPT had to hire the Kenyans to correct the thing, etc. So, shall we take measures to correct society, or shall we take measures to restrain AI research? Okay, I think maybe to answer this question, we have to include here correct society, including AI, because it's here already. And I would call just to close, the three aspects of ethics applied to AI design by Virginia Dignam. Ethics in design, so accountability, responsibility, and transparency, they call it ART acronym. At the core of the AI systems, which has this acronym, the XAI, it's explainable AI, so the AI systems should be able to explain themselves for accountability. Ethics by design, so integrating ethical reasoning capabilities as part of the algorithms in the AI systems. And not only when talking about reasons, it means values, also ethical values, moral values. And ethics for designers, so codes of conduct and certification process of all that research, design, construct, employ, and manage AI systems. So it means all of us, okay, basically. It's quite interesting. And I would like to end in this way. So none, but to give you some hope, because there are many open ways ahead. And thank you for your attention.